Hello, this is Edna White, and I'm so glad you're with me today. Today, we're going to talk about what you all have been asking me for. So, we're going to talk about how to stay in connection when you're in conflict. And we often kind of separate from people when there's conflict, when there's issues, or when something you feel is negative. You want to disengage. You want to just like separate. But that's really not the way. Yes, you can have disagreements, and yes, you can have conflict. Because guess what? Conflict is necessary so that you can be able to communicate correctly. See, if we live in a world that's, I'm not going to face this or that because of conflict, I'm not going to say this or that because they're going to get upset, we never know what's really going on. And you know what? Sometimes I think we don't want to know. So, what we're going to talk about today is going to get really hot. So, let's get started. One of the most underrated life skills is how to be in conflict with someone and still stay connected. How to share your thoughts, your disagreements, and still stay in contact. Conflict is natural and it's a healthy part of life. Yet many of us have experienced conflict that leads to betrayal, rejection, abandonment, and withdrawing. See, we talk about that. If we're experiencing conflict, we then go and talk about the person. Or we feel rejected, so we don't bother. Or we abandon the whole issue. Or we just withdraw, cut them off. That's it. No more talking to them. Everything. Our parent figures teach us how to navigate conflict through how they navigate conflict. Some of us saw when there was conflict, there was yelling, fighting, avoidance. So we saw these things and they are dysfunctional. See, one thing we have to be very clear in our lives is we have to be very honest with ourselves. When you become honest with yourself, you become unstoppable. Now, many of us witness dysfunction, like name calling, silent treatment, shaming, saying you're too sensitive. Why are you being so dramatic? You can get over it. Scorekeeping, one-upping the other, projection, the defensive mechanism of attributing traits to a person it doesn't like about themselves onto someone else, denial, pretending issues don't exist, or downplaying them as if it wasn't that bad. You're making this bigger than it is. These unhealthy dynamics play out in our adult relationships, believe it or not. This is because we never learned healthy conflict relationship skills. When we don't learn this, conflict becomes overwhelming, scary, and sometimes we want to avoid it. Many people see conflict as a sign that the person isn't for them or the relationship won't work. The truth is, conflict is part of the relationship. Learn how to resolve conflict and you will have healthier relationships. Healthy partnerships have awareness that conflict is unavoidable. You have conflict. And that's what I'm really learning now for myself. I'm learning that you can have conflict in certain situations as long as your life is not in danger. Okay? So you can have healthy conflict. You can be able to talk about it. When you're able to directly to talk about it, the goal of conflict is for the deeper understanding of each other's perspectives. And there's not a win-win. It's just to understand. Conflict is to understand this perspective and this perspective and to understand it. That's all it is. And to be aware of it and to take note of it. And if you had a part in it, take your part and apologize. But not listening, avoiding, don't talking about it does not create a great relationship overall. You see, our nervous system dictates our ability to communicate, and we may need breaks. My partner has my best interest at heart, even when we disagree. My friends have my best interest in heart, even when we disagree. My parents have my best interest in heart, even when we disagree. That's the statement you want to get. Disagreement is natural. And it's neutral. Hey, it is. It's neutral. You don't have a skinny in the game on each side. All you have to do is learn to listen and shut your mouth. And we don't need to agree on everything in order to find a solution. See, when I find that people, even myself, when I start backing off from conflict and disagreements, I start moving toward it. I've learned to start moving toward it because that means to me that if you're pulling away from me, I'm saying something or I believe something or I've said something that you don't agree with. So you're going to stay far away. And that's not real life. That's actually fake life. So do you want to grow or do you want to go down the rabbit hole? Which one is it? So how do you start having healthy conflict? Number one, I always talk about childhood inventory. You know that. Check out where everything comes from. And where does it come from? Childhood. Our childhood is a massive petri dish of information for us to get and grow from. This is where it all was impacted in our childhood. This is where we engaged in it. Do a childhood inventory with your partner, with your friends, with yourself, with your parents. You know? And if you can't do that, first do it with yourself, right? Ask yourself how you dealt with conflict. Remember how conflict was played out for you in front of you. Then write it down in your journal. You can also buy my book, The Big Ask. It's a guide, a workbook on how to ask these tough questions for childhood, these tough questions for adulthood, and you can write it down. And you can always go back to it and reflect on it and change it as your life changes. So, getting back. Not only with parents, but conflict with friends, families, and even strangers. Did they shut you down? Were they highly reactive? Were they hostile, etc.? You have to come back to all of that. So, number one, do a childhood inventory. Number two, active listening. Some of us only listen to respond, and that's a big problem. Active listening is the act of truly being present to what another person says. So you can actually repeat what they said verbatim and understand what they meant. That's a skill. Hearing what they said verbatim and understand what they meant. This is difficult because most of us are just preparing what we want to say and debunking what the other person is saying. So we want to dispel what they're saying. We want to get our jabs in. This only creates defensiveness. Breathe and listen to what the person is actually saying from a space of curiosity. 3, reflection. We all have a deep need to be heard. When someone is sharing with you, before stating your side, reflect on what they've said, not what you're going to say. So consider what they're saying. For example, someone is saying, so when I did that, it hurt you because you felt like I wasn't considering you. You're repeating back what they've said in a kind and understanding way. Or, so when I tell you when I'm coming home or I'm late, you get anxious. Is that right? Or when I withdraw, you feel rejected and need me to be vocal that I need a break, right? Repeat back what other people say. 4, nervous system awareness. When our nervous system is in fight, or freeze, or fawn mode, we lose the ability to access a logical part of our brain that allows us to clearly communicate. So, for example, for me, when I was around my mother, before our relationship became a lot better, I would feel like I was 12. I would freeze and then I would fawn. Now I'm in my 30s, 40s, and 50s, and I would freeze and then I would fawn. Say nothing. Act like a little baby. So our body is in threat mode. So you're in this mode when your mind is racing and your heart is racing and you can't seem to get words out. Be aware of this. Learn to be aware of your triggers. See, most of the time we're so busy, so thinking about not being in the moment that we're not feeling what we feel when we feel it at that moment. We're just so in the future. Self-awareness is about being in the moment because that's when you can feel things, right? So you have to know that state when you're there. We're more likely to access this state if we've been through childhood trauma during conflict. But be aware of your history. Be aware of the person's history that you're talking to. Be aware. I'm not saying dismiss it. I'm saying be aware. It's important to say, I need a break, or we can come back to this at a specific time. You can say those things, but know your nervous system awareness. Know it. 5, solution focused. In dysfunctional relationships, there's a deep need to control. It's just control. Has nothing to do with, parenthood, sisterhood, brotherhood, anything like that. Romantic relationships, partner, spouse, marriage. It's all about control. So that attempt to gain control by bringing up past incidents to build their case, scorekeeping, is wrong. It has to be solution oriented. You have to be willing to resolve conflict, to have an end to scorekeeping and begin practicing being solution focused. So, okay, I hear your side and I understand when I do this and I do that, or I say this and I say that, it makes you feel this way. Now, how do we move forward? How can I help move forward? And you know what? That would change the whole dynamic of a conversation, of a dialogue. It would change a whole conversation. Being solution focused means staying on course with the present issue and attempting to find a solution that benefits everyone. Everyone. You know what I'm saying? 6, affirm and reassure. Conflict is scary for all of us. It can help if we hug each other, tell each other you love each other, or hold hands in silence during or after the issue. Sometimes it may not be that easy, but you can say kind words like, thank you for being able to share your part of what you're going through. And just be really honest. It's time to really be honest with ourselves. 7, stop using absolutes. Words like, you always did, you never do, not surprised, you did it again. All these negative statements are absolutes. Speak for yourself. It will feel vulnerable, maybe even scary, but keep the focus on your feelings. I felt. Use those, quote, I felt. Regardless of our backgrounds, we can still practice staying connected during conflict. Regardless, our relationships will be safer, stronger, and more fulfilling if we put this to practice. Now, I hope that what I've said to you today really helped you get the idea of having conflict and being connected. Going back to those specific areas that, or relationships that you've had conflict with, and making amends your way. And even if they can't accept it, you're trying to keep open communication. You're letting your part be known. And if you can't, as long as you're safe, if you can't, then you know that that's the end of what you've done, and you've done your best. But don't let relationships, like your sons, your daughters, your cousins, all of those, don't let those, have little conflicts that could be solved with just a conversation. And if you've done your best, and you can be honest with yourself, you've done your best, then you can say, the rest is up to them. This is Edna White. See you next time.